Hello, it's me again. So sometimes I go through these, I guess I call them my pain days, where it's really difficult to do a lot of stuff, and I guess I sometimes wonder if the Lord's getting me still so that I will speak out the things that He's been putting on my heart. So I'm speaking them out because I'm really ready to be done with this little session of pain days. Um, so anyway, I was this is this one that this thought this I'm sure I've mentioned some of this stuff before because it's just all constantly percolating in me because I guess it's kind of like a thing like there's certain things that the Lord shows us that I feel like once we see it, it's not like He shows us in a way that's like, just watch, pay attention to this, like here's a core something for you to understand this issue, and then just keep gathering data, and then you start to see how so many things connect, right? So before I let my ping pong ball get totally out of control, I should probably talk about what I'm actually trying to talk about, or let the Lord speak through me what He wants to speak. But so I guess it's like it's about faith, right? And shoot, I've got to find that passage. One second. Okay, so it's Luke chapter 18, verse 8 is what I'm talking about when Jesus says, like, because it's basically it's at the end of the story where he's talking about the persistent widow, where he's giving a pattern for like how to keep praying persistently, because in this situation this widow is demanding from a judge who doesn't care about anything, doesn't care about justice or people or anything, like, but because she's so persistent and continues to ask him to give her justice, eventually he's like, oh, because she keeps bothering me, I will give her justice. And he's saying, so how much more will God, who does care and is just, um, answer the prayers of those who cry out to him day and night, right? And but then he ends it with, but when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? And it's just something that I guess I have a unique perspective a little bit on our faith problem because of the path the Lord has taken my life, right? Because I had some time, I had 2 months of my life that I lived in this, I always think of it as like the tabernacle, right? Like, um, which was kind of like that portable little like temple place to meet with God on the battlefield, where it was just, I would, because of I was coming out of drug addiction and everything, and I lived at this place. It was a Christian home, and it was called Walter Hoving Home, and it was so different. Like the world was just different. Like you got in there. I remember going in there and going, "Oh, great, this is a weird place. I don't know if I'm gonna fit here." And then it was like the Lord just started doing things, and it was like when I left there, I still had all that, but it was like coming back out of that. It was just the church isn't like that. Like when I went in there, like I had tried to come off of, because I had a problem with pain medicine at the time, and I tried to come off of pain medicine, and the withdrawals I would get were terrible. It was like um, the worst stomach flu and like fevers and everything. Like it just lasted forever. Like it was just like, um, and so I was really concerned when going into a place like, what's going to happen? How do I handle the withdrawals there? And they just said, well, we'll pray for you. And there was just something about the way they said it that just like, I was like, this is the place, right? And and they prayed for me, and I didn't have withdrawals. I felt a little bit lousy, but it wasn't like the whole flu or being super sick. It was totally different. And one of the people that I was in the program with, she was my big sister in the program. She, when she had come to Walter Hoving Home, had been given like a 10% chance to live because she had cirrhosis of the liver so bad, and she'd had an alcohol problem. And so anyway, but you would never have known to look at her at that point because she'd already been there for a couple of months, and the Lord was just working in her. Like it was, but it was like a place where when people like, I just remember seeing prayer so much differently while I was there, because people had faith, because it's like when you're in a place where everyone is reading the Bible, because that was the thing, that it's like every single one of us, we might have been in different places because we came in at different times, but we were all reading the Bible every day, like for hours. Like that was basically what we did. Um, we would do Bible journaling. Because we had this like learning center, you would do work time, and there was other things we would do, but it was several hours a day that we just spent reading the Bible. And it was just so different because everybody was doing that, and we were all like really open and honest about our situations, like where we were coming from, and you could just see the changes happen in people. And it was like people would say, like, we'd talk about it like, have they had their change, their moment? Because you'd see people come in one way, and then you'd see the Lord take hold of them, and you'd see a different person. And it was like, it was just different, right? And it's like the biggest thing was like, it was just like, there was no TV, there was no news, there was no books that, or there was nothing like that allowed. Like, even if you're like, I was going through legal stuff at the time, and it was like I was only allowed like pockets of time to even think about that. And it was just like, you the world was drowned out for us. We were put in this little tabernacle. I called it a snow globe, like, because everything inside, like, there were things we would get so dramatic about and think they were so terrible, because our world was just so small. And it was like, because you couldn't, like, I think after I had been there for 1 month, then you could finally like at least go outside for a walk, but it had to be three of you everywhere you go. It had to at least be three, and you could only go walk around the block, but you couldn't go anywhere. Like when you went to church, you had to stay together as a group. And it was not any of the emotional things. Like we would have worship time or singing, but it was like you sing a couple songs, no musical accompaniment, nothing super emotional. And they were pretty like against that. And I kind of like, not like actively, they didn't speak out against it. Like, just, we don't do that here. We keep it simple, because it was like you're dealing with people coming from extreme emotional backgrounds of things, and with drugs and other stuff. Like some of them had backgrounds in prostitution. And it's like, it was like, we're not trying to stir up emotions, because we're trying to get to the truth. We want the Lord to be able to access each person, and not just the emotional manipulation that makes you feel like you get like a high off of it, because you're dealing with people who struggled with getting high. And I just remember, even at one point when I was there, like, I remember having this feeling all the time. Like, I felt like slightly high, and I was like, something wrong? Am I doing something wrong? And like, it was so funny, because then it was like, at one point, I don't know, like a month in or something, I realized, this is the presence of the Holy Spirit. Like, it's just, we just live in it every day. And it's just like, it's different feeling. And it was just like, I don't know, it's just such an amazing transformative time. And for me, I think about that sometimes when I think about the issues at the church, that I get, it's so stressful or hard. Like, why is a church like this? And I'm like, they didn't have Walter Honing home. Like, I don't know how people can really get a hold of the faith and really have the Lord take hold of them the way that we live now. Because even now, like, I have that as a root in my life, that in a time that I can remember. But it's so hard to have faith sometimes, and it's like a struggle. Like, it's just different, because I'm trying to like push against so many things, and it's like the whole world is like making war on faith. And I mean, it starts, I believe, with the education system. Like, we send kids to school, and it's like, I know people will make big issues about, well, what they're teaching in schools. It's like, but wait, why are we mandatorily having our children in these schools in the first place? That seems like the problem to me, because once we have that set in, then it's like going to constantly be problems, right? Because we don't have a choice anymore. And it was started out as an opportunity, now it's mandatory, and now it's, anyway. I won't go into that education thing, because I have a whole lot of stuff on the education monster. But specifically, when it comes to, we're not like, we were designed, I believe, to have, where you're brought up in a place where you're taught how to do some things. And you're taught, like, you read the Bible, you learn to read in general, you read, you learn the basic things, but specifically like how to do stuff. But the school systems nowadays are just teaching us how to think about things, and how to like, and what to think, and that kind of thing. And when it comes down to like sciences and stuff, I'm not against science as a general premise, right? Like, I think that science originally was just supposed to be like gathering data about what we observe, right? And going, oh, okay, when this happens, then this happens. But it became something different. And when we teach it in schools, kids are getting so much time of being taught why we should trust scientific thinking, and like, well, show me the science, this kind of thing, and like medical things, and whether just like the way that we teach these things is very much like we are emphasizing the truth of earthly thinking of science, right? Which is like, to me, it's not necessarily quite true, right? Because I think that there's so much more to faith than we understand. Like, I think there's so many references, like Jesus talks so much about faith, and it's just faith is like something that's powerful, that's here. And I don't think it's like just like, I think that it's a part of creation. Like faith, the way that faith works is part of creation, because I think that people, I call it like hacking faith, right? Like where you go and like people can have faith in something without being a Christian, without believing in God, and you can just believe so strongly, the placebo effect, right? Or there's so many things that I'm like, we call it that, the placebo effect, because science can't really explain it. And so that's what, but when it comes to faith, it's kind of like, for me, for example, I've always felt like, okay, if there was something physically with me, like let's say I had cancer, I wouldn't want a doctor to tell me. I wouldn't want them to tell me how much percent chance I have to live. I wouldn't, because then I would have faith in what the doctor said, because I have been raised to trust science. I've been raised to believe those things. And so it's like, it's this wrestling match of not being able to have faith in the one true source that really is supposed to be where our faith goes, right? So that the Lord's will can be done. And, but I don't see, like, the only time I have experienced being in a place where the faith in God in the ambient, like the people around me, the place, everything was greater than faith in anything else, was when I was in Walter Hovingholm. Because we didn't watch the news, we didn't read the newspaper, you didn't have TV shows. Like we watched like one movie on Friday nights, and it was like rated G and stuff, but it was just like, and you were talking and reading and constantly thinking about the Lord and about what the Bible said. And like, we were constantly going through this refining process. And it's like, this is what the church is. That's what, when you read the Bible, that's what the church is. It's not this thing we've got going on today. That's nothing like the church was. And it's so, it's so difficult for me, because like, I just don't understand how um, we can keep trying to keep the current church going without realizing and recognizing, like, this isn't going to change anybody really. Like the Lord can, I'm not going to say the Lord can get a hold of anybody anywhere at any time, but the amount of resistance we face in our daily lives just by having a television, just by keeping up with the news, the amount of resistance we have just by listening to a doctor, just by listening to other Christians that we talk to that are talking about how, I started eating this way and I started doing this, and then all this stuff happens. And then we're putting faith in this eating plan or in this thing. Like, I'm not trying to diss those things. I'm just saying, like, how rarely it is that because when I hear people saying something about the Lord, a lot of times it's a different thing. Like they're talking about it in a way like it's not like really changing anything, but they're just hyping it up, or like they want it to be true so much, but like it's different. Like I don't know how to explain it, but like it was just so different when I was at Walter Hovingholm with people who, the faith, it wasn't like they were trying to drum up faith. It wasn't, they had just seen it happen. They'd seen it happen so many times. It was just like, well, yeah, okay, we'll pray for you and then it'll be all right. Like it was just like no big deal. It wasn't like miraculous. There was no like anybody going, this is so amazing, God's so amazing, giving. It was none of that emotional crap. It was just like, no big deal. Just miracles happen here all the time. Yeah, so what? That's just what happens when the Lord's being the Lord, right? And I just feel like the church, if we had a place, if there was like, and you didn't have to necessarily be a drug addict, you didn't have to be, but like, let's say like you are a person who's received a diagnosis of cancer, or you are a person who is just like, I don't understand, like I'm trying so hard to follow the Lord, but I don't understand, like everything else, my job, everything is making me going against my conscience, going against my faith, like, to be able to go and at least be like, I just need like a week or two to like to resensitize myself to the Lord, to shut off all of this chatter, the constant like, telling us what to think, telling us what to believe, telling us what to trust. And it's like, because it's also wired in from when we're younger and we're going through the school systems and we're already just trained to believe things we're told, as long as they go in accordance with these methods and blah blah blah, and just basically we're told what's trustworthy and what's not. And um to be able to push back on that by ourselves, like just us, like it's so much, like it's like, even though the Lord is present with us, like there's so much that in us holds him back because we do not have the faith. But like how, like unless the church makes a place for us to really hear the Lord and to have that quiet and to have the people around who have seen him work. And because in the church nowadays, like I there's times where I have just not had television. Like and I'm not trying to just harp on TV, but like it is one of those windows into our lives that I think I'm not even saying give it up because I still have it on every night, for a little bit. But like I'm not trying to push on it. But there are times where I have gone without it. There are times where the Lord will be like, just takes all the joy out of it, all the pleasure out of it. And I'm like, okay, so show me where I find so, and I'll go to try and connect with other people, other Christians, and I can't even connect because they're talking about stuff that I can't watch or I don't know. And there's things that are, it's just so permeated in our like in our churches, that we're so much like the culture. There's nowhere that's like cut off from that. And when you talk to people about like needing that kind of place, they go, oh, well, that's cult, right? And I'm like, maybe those turn into cults, but what we got going right now is not really like sin is sin one way or the other, and there's always a risk. And in my opinion as well, like from what I read in the Bible, if we're doing it right, if we're doing church the way that we should be doing, the culture should be not super happy with us. And I'm not talking about like us talking like the not my favorite thing. I'm not going to call it names, but the Christian nationalism thing where it's all about taking back this country and trying to tell everybody abortion is wrong and this is wrong and all that. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about like if we are doing church where people are actually coming out of this worldly kind of thinking and worldly kind of living and really transforming their lives and becoming like spirit-filled believers, like the culture should be unhappy with us just because they're losing people from their system, right? Like the people who were managing this business and making all this money for them and stuff suddenly are like, this isn't important anymore, and I don't want to have this job. I want to go and be at this place and be with people who are studying the word. Like those kind of like people would be unhappy with, the enemy would be sending, of course there would be tons of things going on where somebody would come in and be making claims of I don't know, some kind of inappropriate conduct. There would be lawsuits. There would be all stuff. Because if the church is making an impact, if the church is kind of going into enemy territory and the Holy Spirit is like, then the culture should be upset with us, right? But right now we're pretty darn at peace with each other, and we're pretty okay with, and except for the church, like there's this antagonistic movement in the church that's just kind of seems to be out to antagonize people who aren't Christians and try to draw everybody to a standard of living that's Christian. But that's, to me, it's very backward, especially all the more as I read in the Old Testament and I just read about how flawed how flawed so many people were. Because even though David was a man after God's own heart and all this stuff, there's so many passages I'm like, man, he was a liar. Like, what the heck? I didn't even realize all this stuff. Like, but anyways, there's just so many things that like I realize we have this ideal standards of behaviors and stuff that's all very external, and we like it because it makes it feel like our world is more in control, and we just want to impose that on things because then we can make things nice. But like that's not what we're here to do. And it's just, anyways, my ping pong ball is starting to bounce out of control. But I feel like I'm not saying like everything should just be uprooted. I'm not saying I have an answer. It's just one of those things that like I think that because my experience, because I had that Walter Hoving experience and I understand what church is supposed to look like, it's it's something that I'm mindful of, and it allows me to just see things a little differently. And just knowing that if I'm watching something, if I'm reading news articles, if I like, I know as soon as I be careful, there is a war on my faith. And so don't let anything do, I'm not going to put any stock in any of the stuff that people are saying about this, that, or the other thing. Like, I'm not going to let myself be swayed that way. My faith is in the Lord, and my faith is in, like it just puts me a little bit more on guard, where I recognize it when it happens a little bit better. I still fall, I'm not saying, I'm not saying I get it perfectly. There are times I fall into those traps. I've definitely, oh my goodness, I had a thing a couple years ago where I was doing the bulletproof diet and I totally fell into it again. And then I didn't realize like it was becoming a problem for me. And so anyway, there's always little things. What does it say? First Corinthians, chapter 10, 13 maybe? But where it says like, if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you do not fall. Because a lot of times I've had that happen enough times in my life that where I thought I was standing real firm and then I totally totally face dive in something and go, I cannot believe I fell into this trap again. But I just think it's something for Christians to be mindful of. And I don't know, like I just keep hoping and praying that that something will change in the church where they understand the need for this kind of a place. That because the things that our money, like people's tithes and offerings are going to fund is, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all, because it was originally when people were pooling their resources, it was because they were living in a community like that where you were turning your back on the world, basically, not like exiting it, but like your value system changed. Like, hey, if you have a ton of money and stuff, you're like, I'm giving that up, and I want to live in this place with these people who were all studying, like not just studying the Bible, because early on they didn't even have the Bible yet, but we're all we're seeking and we're following after this Jesus, this, like these miracle, like, and they're experiencing healing. They're experiencing, because I mean, there's the other passage that I've heard churches kind of brush off sometimes, like trying to explain away, but you really can't, right? Where it says, like, if the people, those who, basically when Jesus is saying, those who come after me, those who are my disciples, will be able to drink poison and not die, and that there will be healings, and there are all these things, all the things that I have done and more they will do. And that right there is like, that's a pretty big red flag for us. Like, is that what's going on? Like, do you see that in churches? Like, I don't. I see a whole lot of emotional things, and I see overuse of things like music, which I have gotten away from even making videos with any music in them, because it bypasses your cognitive filter, which means it makes you start feeling things before you can think about them. And I kind of go back to my Walter Hoving time, and we didn't have music playing. We were never allowed to have music playing there. You could, on your free time, you could have like your Walkman or whatever, and you could listen to music, but it was like, um, and I never really understood it. And then I realized, okay, this is why, is because we can get ourselves so caught up in the emotional stir that we can't actually hear the Lord. And it was like in the peace and the quiet and those like gentle conversations about random things that the Lord would just show up so much. And anyway, so all that to say, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm just keeps percolating and coming out. But I feel like it's something that we need to acknowledge. Like, there is a war on our faith constantly. And the more that we allow it to affect us individually, to lose faith or to gain faith in the worldly things, to gain faith in the science and the advertising and well, if I buy the right things, if I do the right things, if I behave the right way, like the more we allow ourselves to fall into that kind of thinking that puts stuff in our control, the more corporately the faith is damaged, right? Because the people we're with, we're all individually struggling with that, and then it doesn't even feel like it's a problem anymore, because it's just how everybody's living. And so when somebody is really in need of healing and all that, there's not really much faith left for them in the church. And it's not like, people will pray, but they're praying kind of going, oh, I hope. And sometimes people will, like, I've had things where where I've really been trying to have faith about something, and I've learned not to mention those things very much to anybody, because I can see it in their faces or hear it in their tone, and I can just, they kind of go, oh, I hope she doesn't have too much faith, because that's going to make God look bad when it doesn't work out, and it's kind of like, it's like so hard to just be like, wait, but I know who this God is, and I know he can do this, and I know he's done like, I've had miracles in my life, I've experienced them. And it's like, it's so hard for it's so hard, like, we really struggle with actually believing in genuine miracles. We sometimes will think like, well, maybe the Lord will send the right doctor or the right thing, and then it will happen. But it's like, and that's fine, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm at the point where I'm like, I just want the Lord to bring healing for me. I don't want doctors involved anymore, because I don't want them getting any of I don't want them getting any of the praise, because they have put me through hell, like, again and again and again. Like, I am just like, I want it from the Lord, and I want people to go, oh wow, the Lord does still do healing, the Lord does still do miracles. Like, I feel like that's what we're missing. Like, we need people to be able, we need to have a place, a people, a circumstance, whatever, like a movement of resensitization to the Holy Spirit, where people are like, shut off your TV, no more news, y'all, like a month, no news, no TV, none of these things. And focusing on reading your Bible, like really let the Lord permeate the church, because then things would change. Like once you get that, and because it's so hard to do and it's just by yourself. I've done it because like when I came out of Walter Hovingham, that was just how I was used to living for a while, and I didn't really want to add stuff back in, you know? And then, but like if people were doing that, like where like lots of people were doing the same thing, guess what? A lot of people will be way more available to chat with because they don't have other stuff going on, you know? Like they're not busy with all of this stuff because they're taking this time to resensitize and to focus in on the Lord. And when you start reading your Bible for yourself and you're focusing on the Lord, it's exciting. It's like, wow, you know, and you want to talk about it and you want to see, you know, and you want to hear what the Lord is speaking to other people. But it's like for me, when I go to churches and I have that experience and I go and I talk to people and they're not super interested because they're not in that place. You know, they want to talk about their job and their house and how they're fixing this up and how they got this promotion or how their kids are doing this or that or the other thing. And I'm like, but it's very difficult because I'm like, but what about like, so what happens when you're reading the Bible? Like, isn't this exciting? Like, come on. And it's just like anyways, I'm yammering again, but I think that it's one of those things like I just wish there would be, I wish the Lord would do, I guess maybe not wish. I'm praying that the Lord would do something, that he would stir up the right people to get those things out of those distractions, those things that chip away at our faith and create this fear and sense, for me, sense of foreboding, right? Like just constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop because the world is just keeps doing that to us, right? But because it's so hard to have faith when it's like everyone you talk to has so much faith in the world, and they, or the medical people keep telling me, like they'll tell me things that like they haven't even figured out what's going on with me and stuff, but they'll just kind of like blame it on, well, it's chronic pain and you're just going to have this forever now. And since that surgery that, you know, they won't even admit was a wrong surgery and all this stuff, you know, but it's like, so I can trust them, and part of me I think starts to, and I think it makes things worse because I'm like, well, I guess this is forever, and I'm like, wait a minute, Avenel, who is your God? Like, this is not forever. Like that woman who suffered for 13 years from the issue of blood, all it took was her to have that one moment of enough faith to just be like, I just need to touch the tassel, just hit tassel, and I will be healed. And she was healed immediately. Jesus didn't even look at her, did anything until she had already received her healing because of her faith. And then he called it out, I think, to solidify her faith, to make her know, yes, you did receive it. Don't doubt yourself. And to let everybody else around know this woman who was unclean is now clean and she has received this healing. And it's just like to get to that point where I can have those moments of faith to receive that. That's that's what a Christian life is like, but it's so hard that there's not a place for that anymore. Like I feel like no matter where I go, like church or the world, it's the same thing. It is. And so I'm gonna stop now because I think I'm getting, my ping pong ball is turning into the pinball machine. So I'm gonna stop.